The Grand Synod of the Volosian Imperium was a cavernous expanse of obsidian and polished starlight, a testament to 10,000 years of unyielding conquest. Here, in the heart of the capital world of Ethelgard, the air was always cool, scented with the burning incense of crushed nebula blooms, and heavy with the gravity of absolute power. High Exarch Thalion stood by the vast panoramic viewport, his four-clawed hands clasped behind his back, looking out not at the city, but at the orbital rings that encircled the planet like a halo of diamond dust. Today was the day of unification. The final reports had come in from the outer rim. The last of the dissident species, the reptilian crate, had formally surrendered their planetary cores to Volosian governance. The galaxy, for the first time in recorded history, was whole. It was silent. It was theirs. Thalion felt the pride swell in his chest, a sensation akin to the warmth of a binary sunrise, yet it was tempered by a strange, hollow ache. War had been the engine of their civilization for so long that peace felt less like a victory and more like an ending. He turned his gaze back to the chamber, where the Council of 12 sat on raised daises, their robes shimmering with the color of the stars they governed. "The subjugation is absolute," intoned Archivist Alara, her voice echoing softly from the central podium. She was old, her scales fading to a majestic silver, her eyes clouded with the knowledge of 1,000 extinct cultures. She manipulated a holographic projection with delicate, trembling fingers, displaying the galaxy as a swirling disk of Volosian blue. "The trade routes are secure. The suppression fields are active in all sector capitals. The probability of insurrection is statistically negligible. We have done it, High Exarch. We have brought order to the chaos." Thalion nodded slowly, stepping down from the viewport to approach the central dais. The sound of his boots on the obsidian floor was sharp, rhythmic, the heartbeat of the Empire. "Order," he repeated, tasting the word. "It was a messy path, Alara, but the chaos has been pruned. The galaxy is a garden, and we are its gardeners." "There were costs," Alara whispered, the hologram flickering as she zoomed in on a scorched system near the galactic edge. "The Thalaxi were erased. The orbital bombardment of Seraph Prime left the surface uninhabitable for 3 cycles. We have peace, Thalion, but it is a quiet built on graves." "Quiet is quiet," interjected Counselor Vrack, a massive, brutish figure whose cybernetic augmentations hummed with suppressed aggression. "Do not mourn the weeds, Archivist. Celebrate the harvest. We are the apex. There is nothing left to challenge us. No unknowns, no threats. We are the gods of this material plane." The arrogance in Vrack's voice grated on Thalion, but he could not deny the truth of it. Their sensors mapped every quadrant. Their fleets patrolled every hyperlane. They had dissected the physics of the universe and bent it to their will. They had conquered the galaxy. And then the alarm sounded. It was not the screeching klaxon of a planetary invasion. That sound had not been heard on Ethelgard for millennia. This was a low, resonant thrum, a vibration that seemed to originate from the bones of the building itself. The holographic map in the center of the room fractured, the blue light turning a harsh, warning crimson. "Report," Thalion commanded, his instincts snapping from philosophical reverie to military precision in a microsecond. "Sensor anomaly," a technician called out from the sunken pits surrounding the council floor, his voice rising in panic. "Sector 0, high orbit. It just appeared." "Appeared," Vrack scoffed, leaning forward. "A rebellion jump ship, a smuggler bypassing the net." "No, Counselor," the technician stammered, his hands flying across the interface. "It did not traverse the hyperlanes, it did not warp, it unfolded, space-time displaced around it, it is massive." Thalion strode to the main display. "Show me." The hologram shifted, focusing on the space directly above the planet's northern pole. At first, the image was distorted, the scanners unable to lock onto the object's geometry. Then the resolution sharpened. The council fell silent. It was a ship, though to call it such felt like a reduction of its magnitude. It was a monolith of matte gray metal, rectangular and brutalist, devoid of the elegant curves and glowing engines that characterized Volosian aesthetics. It hung in the void like a tombstone, absorbing the light of the local star rather than reflecting it. It had no visible weapons ports, no exhaust plumes, no windows. It was simply a block of existence, defying the emptiness around it. And it was large. It dwarfed the orbital defense platforms. It cast a shadow that was visible on the clouds of Ethelgard below. "Identify," Thalion barked, though a cold knot of dread had begun to tighten in his stomach. The design was alien, utterly, terrifiedly alien. "No transponder matches," Alara said, her voice barely a whisper. No silhouette in the archives. It does not match the crate, the thalaxy, or the ancients. It is new. Nothing is new, Vrak roared, slamming his fist onto his dais. We know every species capable of spaceflight. This is a trick, a sensor ghost. It is displacing 40 million tons of atmosphere in the upper exosphere, the technician reported, his face pale. It is real, and it is hailing us. On screen, Thalion ordered. The holographic sphere dissolved into static, then coalesced into a simple, two-dimensional waveform. No face appeared. No bridge. Just a voice speaking perfectly synthesized high Volosian, though the cadence was archaic, heavy, and laden with a sorrow that seemed to predate the Empire itself. We are the keeper of resolve, the voice said. It was not loud, but it filled the chamber, drowning out the ambient hum of the city. We request audience with the caretakers of this sector. We have observed your completion. Vrak stood up, his cybernetics whirring. You are addressing the High Synod of the Volosian Imperium, rulers of the galaxy. Identify your species and surrender your vessel for inspection immediately, or you will be fired upon. There was a pause, a silence that stretched for seconds, heavy and suffocating. We are human, the voice replied, and we do not surrender. Thalion frowned. Human, Ilera. The archivist was frantically scrolling through the deepest layers of the databanks, files corrupted by time and neglect. There is a fragment, she said, her eyes widening. A myth from the pre-expansion era, a species from a death world in the Orion Arm, but they were primitive, kinetic weapons, chemical rockets. They were quarantined 10,000 cycles ago because they were deemed a self-extinction risk. They should be dead. They are not dead, Thalion muttered, looking at the gray monolith on the screen. Open fire, Vrak commanded, overriding protocol. Show them the might of the Imperium. Thalion moved to stop him, but the order had already been relayed to the orbital defense grid. The sky above Ethelgard lit up as hundreds of plasma lances and antimatter torpedoes streaked toward the intruder. The firepower was enough to crack a moon. The council watched, some with glee, others with bated breath, as the deluge of energy impacted the gray hull. The explosion was blinding. A sphere of superheated energy enveloped the human ship, glowing like a second sun. The chamber shook violently. Target destroyed, Vrak declared, sitting back with a satisfied grunt. Primitive. As the smoke and energy dissipated in the vacuum, the sensors recalibrated. Thalion watched the readout, waiting for the debris field. There was no debris. The Keeper of Resolve sat exactly where it had been, untouched. There were no shields flaring, no shimmering energy barriers. The weapon fire hadn't been blocked. It had been negated. The ship had simply absorbed the energy, drinking the violence of the Imperium like water. Impossible, the technician whispered. Energy absorption at 100%, no thermal spike, no hull stress, they ate it. The voice returned, calm, unchanged, carrying no hint of anger, only a profound disappointment. That was unnecessary. We are not here to fight. We are here to adjudicate. Adjudicate? Thalion stepped forward, his voice projecting his command authority. You encroach upon the capital of the galaxy, you withstand our fire, and you speak of judgment. Who are you to judge the Volosian Imperium? We are the ones who watched, the voice said. We are the ones who waited. Prepare a landing zone. One shuttle, no weapons. We will speak face to face. The transmission cut. The panic in the Synod was immediate and chaotic. Counselors shouted over one another, military strategies were proposed and discarded, and accusations flew. But Thalion stood silent, staring at the gray block in the sky. He was a warrior, born and bred, but he knew when he was outmatched. You do not shoot at a mountain and expect it to bleed. Clear the Grand Plaza, Thalion ordered, his voice cutting through the din. High Exarch, you cannot intend to let them land, Vrak protested. It's a Trojan horse, a bomb. If they wanted to kill us, Vrak, I suspect we would already be dead, Thalion said, his eyes cold. Ilera, come with me. Vrak, ready the Imperial Guard, but do not, I repeat, do not, engage unless I give the signal. The descent of the human shuttle was as unnerving as the arrival of the mothership. It made no sound. It had no engines. It was a simple black tetrahedron that floated down through the clouds, defying gravity through means the Volosian sensors could not analyze. It landed in the center of the Grand Plaza, a vast ceremonial square paved with white marble, surrounded by the towering statues of past emperors. Thalion stood at the foot of The plaza steps, flanked by 200 of his elite Praetorian guard, their armor gleaming, their halberds crackling with energy. Behind him, the archivist Alara shivered, clutching her data slate. The air was thick with tension. The entire city had fallen silent, millions of eyes watching the screens, watching the sky. The side of the tetrahedron dissolved, literally turned into mist and faded away, revealing a dark interior. From the shadows, a single figure emerged. He was small, that was Thalian's first thought. Compared to the 7-foot scaled and muscular frame of a Valosian, the human was diminutive. He wore no armor, no exoskeleton, no visible weapons. He was dressed in a suit of dark, woven fabric, simple and utilitarian. His skin was pale, his hair gray and close-cropped. He looked frail. He looked ordinary. But as the human walked across the marble toward them, Thalian felt a shift in the air. The human walked with a weight that had nothing to do with gravity. He did not look at the guards. He did not look at the statues. He looked directly at Thalian, his eyes dark and piercing, holding a depth of intelligence that made the High Exarch want to look away. The human stopped 10 paces from the guards. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of politeness that felt more like a concession to a child than respect for an equal. "I am Director Aris Thorn," the human said. His voice was not amplified, yet it carried clearly across the plaza. "I represent the Sol Coalition." Thalian straightened his spine, towering over the human. "I am High Exarch Thalian of the Valosian Imperium. You have trespassed in our sovereign space, ignored our interdiction, and insulted our military. Explain yourself, Director Thorn." Thorn sighed, reaching into his pocket. The guards tensed, weapons raised. Thorn ignored them, pulling out a small, metallic disc and placing it on the ground. A hologram sprang to life, not a map of the galaxy, but a timeline, a complex, weaving lattice of light. "We have trespassed nowhere," Thorn said softly. "We have been here the whole time, you just weren't looking." "Lies," Vrak's voice boomed from the communication link in Thalian's ear. "Kill him, Thalian. He is one man." Thalian held up a hand to silence the link. "Explain." 10,000 years ago, Thorn began, pacing slowly around the hologram, humanity reached a crossroads. We had cracked the atom, then the gene, then the fabric of space itself. We built ships that could eat stars. We built weapons that could rewrite causality. We looked out at the galaxy and saw empty real estate. We could have taken it, all of it, in a week. Alara stepped forward, her curiosity overriding her fear. "Why didn't you? The drive to expand is the fundamental imperative of all sentient life." Thorn stopped and looked at her, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Is it? That is what you believe. That is what the Valosians believe. That is why you have spent the last millennium burning worlds and enslaving species. You think the universe is a prize to be won." He gestured to the sky, where the Keeper of Resolve hung like a sword of Damocles. "We realized that to conquer the galaxy was to kill it," Thorn continued. "If we expanded, we would consume everything. We would become a plague, so we made a choice. The hardest choice a civilization can make. We chose sufficiency. We chose to hide. We folded our systems into pocket dimensions, tucked away in the dark matter shadows of the galaxy. We watched. We waited to see if anyone else would rise who was worthy." "Worthy?" Thalian bristled. "We have united the galaxy. We have ended war." "You ended war by killing everyone who disagreed with you," Thorn said, his voice hardening. "That is not peace. That is silence. There is a difference." Thorn tapped the holographic timeline. Images flared, Valosian atrocities. The burning of the Thalaxy hives, the biological sterilization of the Crate moons, the forced labor camps on the rim worlds. "We watched you," Thorn said, his tone dropping to a glacial chill. "We hoped you would grow out of your infancy. We hoped that once you had security, you would turn to benevolence. But you didn't. You became a machine of consumption, and now you have finished. You have conquered the galaxy, and in doing so, you have triggered the protocol." "What protocol?" Thalian demanded, stepping closer, his hand drifting to the plasma sword at his hip. "The Gardener's Protocol," Thorn said. "When a species becomes a monolith, when it chokes the diversity of the galaxy to a single point, it becomes a cancer, and cancers must be excised." Thalian drew his sword, the plasma blade humming with violet energy. "You threaten us with extinction? You, a single ship, a single man." Thorn looked at the sword, unimpressed. "I am not threatening you, High Exarch. I am warning you, and I am not alone." Thorn looked up. Above the atmosphere, behind the Keeper of Resolve, the star S began to blink out. Not one by one, but in clusters, the sky was darkening. "Sensors," Thalion screamed into his comms. "What is happening?" "Hi, Exarch," the technician's voice was sobbing now. They're everywhere. The cloaking fields, they are dropping everywhere." Thalion looked up. The sky was not empty, it was full. Thousands, no, millions of ships. They had been there, invisible, silent, watching. Titanic vessels, sleek and geometric, ringing the planet, ringing the solar system. The Keeper of Resolve was not a lone traveler. It was the tip of a spear that was unimaginably vast. "The Sol Coalition fleet," Thorne said quietly. "We have a ship over every major Valosian world. We have a dampener field around every fleet staging ground. Your weapons no longer work. Your warp drives are inert. Your empire effectively ceased to exist 10 seconds ago." Thalion tried to activate his sword. The blade sputtered and died. He pulled the trigger on his gauntlet blaster. Nothing. He looked at his guards. Their halberds were dead metal. The silence that fell over the plaza was absolute. The might of the Valosian Imperium, built over centuries, had been turned off like a light switch. "This is magic," Alara whispered, falling to her knees. "Technology," Thorne corrected. "Sufficiently advanced. We control the local electromagnetic constants. We can turn off the strong nuclear force if we have to, but that tends to be messy." Thalion dropped his useless sword. He felt a wave of dizziness. His world, his reality, had shattered. They were not the conquerors. They were the ants in a jar, and the humans were the ones holding the lid. "What will you do to us?" Thalion asked, his voice hoarse. "Slaves, execution." Thorne shook his head. "We are not you, Thalion. We do not want slaves. We want peers, but you are not ready. You are arrogant, cruel, and short-sighted. You have broken the galaxy, and now you are going to help us fix it." "Fix it?" Thalion looked up, confused. Thorne's expression softened, the hard edge of judgment replaced by a weary urgency. "Do you know why we stayed hidden? Why we didn't stop you sooner? Because we were busy." Thorne waved his hand, and the hologram changed. It zoomed out of the galaxy, out into the intergalactic void. There, in the darkness between the Milky Way and Andromeda, was a shadow, a creeping, purple stain that was moving toward them. "There are things in the dark," Thorne said. "Things that eat galaxies, not empires, not conquerors, consumers, the entropic tide. They are coming. They have been coming for 1,000,000 years." Thalion stared at the horror on the display. It was a swarm, a biological tide of such scale that it defied comprehension. "We have been holding the line at the galactic edge," Thorne said. "But we are losing. We need resources. We need logistics. We need soldiers. We need a galaxy that is organized, efficient, and ready for war. You spent 10,000 years turning this galaxy into a fortress. You thought you were building it for yourselves. You were. You were building it for the war to come." The realization hit Thalion like a physical blow. The irony was cosmic. The Valosian need for control, for order, for weapons, it was exactly what the humans needed. But the humans had the ethics, the technology, the restraint. The Valosians had the raw mass, the bodies, the infrastructure. You let us conquer," Thalion whispered. "We guided you subtly," Thorne admitted. "A nudge here, a suppressed rebellion there. We needed a unified galaxy. We didn't like how you did it, and we will have a long reckoning about your methods. But the infrastructure is in place, and now the tide is here." Thorne extended a hand to the High Exarch. "The Valosian Imperium is dead," Thorne said. "Today, the Galactic Defense Initiative is born. You have your war, Thalion. A real war, not against weaklings you can crush, but against a monster that will consume us all if we falter. Are you ready to fight for something other than your own vanity?" Thalion looked at the human's hand. He looked at the sky, filled with the silent, terrifying power of the human fleet. He looked at Alara, who was looking at him with hope for the first time in years. The arrogance of the conqueror died in that moment. In its place, a cold, grim resolve took root. Thalion grasped Thorne's hand. It was small, but the grip was like iron. "Command us," Thalion said. The transition was not easy. It was a societal shock that nearly broke the Valosian psyche. To go from masters of the universe to junior partners in a survival alliance was a pill too bitter for many to swallow. There were riots. There were suicides. Counselor Vrak tried to lead a coup, attempting to override the human dampening fields with chaotic, jury-rigged tech. It ended when a single human marine, wearing powered armor that looked like it was woven from light, walked through the wall of Vrak's bunker, dismantled the resistance without firing a shot, and arrested the counselor for gross incompetence. But as the weeks turned into months, the truth of Thorne's words became undeniable. The human fleets docked at the Volosian shipyards. They didn't bring oppressors, they brought engineers. They began to upgrade the Volosian ships. They installed shields that didn't just block energy but redirected it. They installed engines that didn't tear space but slipped through it. Thalion watched the transformation from the bridge of his flagship, the Sovereign's Will. It had been retrofitted with human tech. It was no longer a clumsy hammer, it was a scalpel. He stood next to Captain Sarah Vance, a human officer assigned as his liaison. She was young, barely a fraction of his age, but she had seen things in the void that Thalion couldn't imagine. "The integration is at 94%, Vance said, reading a holographic display that floated in the air. "Your crews are learning fast, high exarch. They have a knack for the kinetic drivers." "We have always been good at shooting things," Thalion grunted. "It is the not shooting that troubles us." Vance smiled. "You'll learn, discipline is the other side of the coin." "Director Thorne?" Thalion asked, looking out at the armada gathering at the edge of the system. "Where is he?" "He is on the Keeper of Resolve, leading the vanguard," Vance said. "We are moving to the Halo Stars. The tide has breached the perimeter." "The Halo Stars," Thalion mused. "We never went there. The navigation hazards were extreme." "We put the hazards there," Vance said casually, "to keep you in and to keep them out, but the barriers are failing." The order came an hour later. The fleet was to jump. This was not the Terran shred warp travel the Volosians were used to. The human drive engaged, and the universe didn't blur. It simply shifted. One moment they were over Ethelgard, the next they were in the deep void of the Halo Stars, thousands of light years away. And there Thalion saw the enemy. It looked like a bruise on the universe, a swirling purple and black mass of organic ships, writhing tentacles, and biological horror. It spanned light years. It was consuming a star system, literally wrapping around the sun and draining it, while the planets were stripped of biomass by clouds of spores the size of continents. "By the void," Thalion whispered. "Battle stations," Vance said, her voice turning to steel. "This is the first wave. If they get past us, they hit the Volosian core worlds in 3 weeks." The battle that followed was beyond anything the Volosian history books had ever recorded. It was not a battle of maneuvering and tactics. It was a battle of physics. The human ships, the Sol dreadnoughts, opened fire with weapons that fired miniature singularities. Each hit tore a hole in the tide, collapsing biomass into nothingness. But the tide was endless. For every 1,000,000 tons destroyed, 2 million more surged forward. The Volosian fleet, emboldened by their new tech and the sheer terror of the enemy, fought with a ferocity that surprised even the humans. They were the anvil. The humans were the hammer. Thalion commanded the center line. "Focus fire on the Leviathan-class bioform, Sector 4, he roared. The Sovereigns will unleash a barrage of antimatter beams, cutting a swathe through the enemy. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 9, a damage control officer screamed. "They are boarding us." "Repel boarders." Thalion grabbed a heavy pulse rifle, a gift from the humans, and turned to the bridge door. "Vance, you have the con, keep firing." Thalion charged into the corridor, his Praetorians behind him. The enemy had breached the airlock. They were nightmare creatures, chitin and slime, multi-limbed horrors that moved with blinding speed. Thalion roared a primal sound of defiance and opened fire. The pulse rifle shredded the first wave, blue plasma burning through alien flesh. He fought not for conquest, not for glory, but for survival. For the first time, he understood what the humans meant. This was war, real war. He smashed the butt of his rifle into a creature's skull, crushed another with his clawed hand. He fought until the corridor was slick with ichor, until his lungs burned and his armor was scored with acid. When the silence finally returned, Thalion slumped against the bulkhead, breathing heavy. "Bridge to Exarch," Vance's voice crackled. "The tide is retreating. The Keeper of Resolve just detonated a cascading negabomb in their central cluster. They are breaking off." Thalion laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Retreating, we made them bleed." "We made them bleed," Vance confirmed. Thalion returned to the bridge, wiping slime from his armor. The view screen showed the aftermath. The void was filled with the drifting carcasses of the bioships. The human fleet had taken heavy losses, but they held the line. The Volosian fleet was battered, but unbroken. A communication channel opened. It was Director Thorne. He looked tired. There was a cut on his forehead and soot on his collar. "Good work, Thalion," Thorn said. "Your forces held the center. We couldn't have done it without the mass of your fleet." Thalion felt a swell of pride, different from before. This wasn't the pride of a master looking at a slave. It was the pride of a brother looking at a brother. "They will return," Thalion said. "They will," Thorn nodded. "And we will be waiting. We have a lot of work to do. We need to retrofit the entire Imperial Navy. We need to uplift the rim worlds you neglected. We need to turn this galaxy into a fortress that can stand for 10,000 years." Thalion looked at the tactical map. The Volosian Empire was gone. The borders were meaningless now. There was only the galaxy and the dark outside. "Director," Thalion said, "the Volosian industrial complex is at your disposal. We will build the ships. You provide the science." "Agreed," Thorn said, and Thalion. "Yes. You can stop calling us the humans. We are all Terrans now. Earth is just a place. Terra is an idea. Welcome to the family." The channel closed. Thalion looked out at the stars. They looked different now. They weren't jewels to be possessed. They were campfires in a long, cold night. And for the first time, Thalion wasn't afraid of the dark, because he knew what was out there, and he knew that the monster standing next to him, the small, pale, terrifying human, was on his side. He turned to his crew, Volosians who had known only arrogance, now tempered by the fire of true conflict. "Set course for the shipyards," Thalion commanded. "We have a galaxy to defend." The Sovereign's will turned, its engines flaring a brilliant, defiant blue against the black, flying in formation with the gray monolith of the Keeper of Resolve. Two species, one formerly the Conqueror, the other the Silent Guardian, now united against the entropy of the universe. And somewhere in the deep archives of the human fleet, a file was updated. Status: Galaxy United. Awakening protocol complete. The shield is active. The story of the Volosian conquest was over. The story of the galactic defense had just begun. Deep Space Outpost 4, 2 years later. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the ventilation and the clinking of glass. Thalion sat across from Thorn. The furniture was human-sized, so Thalion had to hunch slightly, but he didn't mind. They were drinking a liquid Thorn called whiskey. It burned, but it was a good burn. "You knew," Thalion said, swirling the amber liquid. "You knew about the Crate Rebellion before it happened." Thorn smiled, looking at the chess board between them. "We supplied them, kinetic drivers, just enough to annoy you, not enough to win." "Why?" "Stress testing," Thorn said, moving a pawn. "We needed to see how your logistics network handled asymmetrical warfare. You failed, by the way. You just bombed them from orbit. Lazy." Thalion chuckled. "We were efficient." "You were brute force," Thorn corrected. "And brute force breaks when it hits something harder, like the tide." "The tide has been quiet for 6 months," Thalion noted. "They are regrouping," Thorn said. "Evolving. The next wave will be immune to the negabombs. We are working on phase-shifting torpedoes. Your scientists from the Delta sector are actually quite brilliant with phase mechanics, once they stop trying to use it for torture devices." Thalion grimaced. "We have cultural baggage." "We all do," Thorn said. "Humans used to nuke each other over which god they liked better. We got over it. You will too." The door to the lounge opened. Ilara walked in. She was no longer wearing the heavy ceremonial robes of the archivist. She wore a sleek, functional jumpsuit with the insignia of the Scientific Directorate, a combined human-Volosian sigil. "High Exarch Director," she nodded. "You need to see this." "Problem?" Thalion asked. "Discovery," Ilara said. "Deep-range scans in the Magellanic Clouds. We found a signal." "The tide?" Thorn asked, his eyes sharpening. "No," Ilara said. She projected a hologram onto the table. It was a structure, a ring the size of a solar system. It was broken, ancient, drifting in the void. "It's not human, it's not Volosian, and it's not the tide." Thorn leaned in, his face pale. "The Builders." Thalion looked at him. "Builders." "A theory," Thorn whispered. "We found ruins on Earth, on Mars, deep buried, predating life. Hints of a civilization that engineered the hyperlanes. We thought they were gone." "The signal is active," Ilara said. "It's a beacon. It triggered when we detonated the negabomb. It's calling out." "Calling who?" Thalion asked. Thorn stood up, staring at the ring. "I don't know, but if the tide is the infection, maybe this is the immune system." "Or the doctor," Thalion said. Thorn looked at Thalion, a spark of excitement in his eyes, the restless curiosity. That made humans so dangerous and so vital. We have to go there. It's outside the perimeter, Thalion warned. It's undefended. Then we take the Keeper, Thorn said, and the Sovereign just us, a reconnaissance in force. Thalion downed the rest of his whiskey. He stood up, towering over the human, his friend. Into the unknown, Thalion said, again. It's the only place worth going, Thorn grinned. As they walked out of the room side by side, the galaxy outside the window seemed to shine a little brighter. The fear was gone. The stagnation was broken. The Volosian Imperium was dead, buried under the weight of its own arrogance. But from the ashes, something stronger had risen. A single human warship had appeared in orbit, and it hadn't just conquered them. It had saved them. It had shown them that the universe was not a map to be colored in, but a book to be read. And they were only on the first page. The Sovereign's will and the Keeper of Resolve broke orbit, engines sinking. They aligned their vectors toward the Magellanic Clouds, toward the ancient signal, toward the next great mystery. Behind them, the fleets of the Alliance stood guard, a wall of metal and will against the dark. Engage, Thalion ordered. The stars stretched into lines of light, and they were gone. The galaxy spun on, vast and indifferent but no longer silent, for now there were guardians, and they were watching.